welcome to Crucifix Channel. Today we're going to be going over my dark underground iceberg. But what is an iceberg? Let's use something as an example. Dark underground music. What we'll be going over is the most known facts of the subject to the least known facts. A lot of people seem to forget that an iceberg is not a competition. It's about what's relevant to the subject and what contributes the most to it. I wanted to make this iceberg because it's fun. I would explain what dark underground means, but then that would make the whole video like a whole hour long. So it's pretty self-explanatory. But that's enough of my little introduction. I hope you guys enjoy my dark underground iceberg.
XXXTentacion. XXXTentacion was an experimental rapper that paved the way in the SoundCloud era and changed the way the underground viewed music. X would experiment his songs with metal, rock, lo-fi, and trap music. X has had a long-lasting impact, more than I have seen any other artist bring. But who was XXXTentacion? X was born on January 23rd, 1998 and grew up in South Florida. X would have a troubling upbringing, growing up with an absent father, getting into school fights, and being sentenced to juvie many times. X would actually meet Mask The Slump God in juvie in 2013. X and Ski Mask became friends, started making music together, and began the group Members Only. I have a whole entry on Members Only, so stay watching for that. Before X blew up, he had already made a small cult fan base for himself, but didn't hit mainstream until Look At Me blew up while he was in jail. This song would shake the rap world. At the time, it was very different and very new. X would soon come out of jail, sign a deal, and dropped a lot of classics. It seemed like it was going good for X, but wait, I did mention jail, right? On October 8th, 2016, X was arrested on domestic violence charges. He was accused of beating up his ex-girlfriend while she was pregnant. X would deny these accusations and claim that the marks and bruises on the victim were all from somebody else. However, on March 2017, X was bailed out. These charges wouldn't drop though completely. The charges would resurface again in December 2017. X was released on house arrest and was awaiting trial until June 18, 2018, where X would tragically lose his life. X was shot dead while being robbed at a motorcycle shop. This death shocked the internet. X was already a big artist. Almost every news outlet was posting about him, and fans began to grieve. But while fans were grieving for his death, an audio call was leaked between X and somebody else, where X was admitting to beating up his ex-girlfriend. Truth be told, if X was still alive, he would have went to prison. But X tried to flip his life around towards the end of his life. X would go on multiple Instagram lives, where X would speak to his fans about mental health, expressing his emotions, and being his authentic self that drew a lot of people into him. X also expressed regret about his past actions, and even if people still have strong opinions about him and his actions, no one can deny his influence in the music world and the underground. I think it's a shame that X couldn't redeem himself before he died, but it is what it is. Rest in peace, XXX. Let's move on to another trap metal pioneer, Lil Darky. Lil Darky is one of the biggest trap metal rappers that has come out in our generation. Based from California, Darky would grow up having a huge passion with film production. He would often get help and resources from his teachers because they thought he was very talented, but they stopped helping him when he became a bad student. Darky would also face a lot of criticism and racism in his school, telling him that he doesn't look like your average Indian and that he's not acting like his race, which would have a big impact on his later life. Darky decides to drop out of school. During this time, Darky would develop a passion for music by listening to artists like Odd Future Wolfgang. When Darky started making music, he would go by the alias Brahman. He also had his own little blue character for him too. Not too long into making music, Darky would change his name from Brahman to Lil Darky. The reason behind this name was because he had a crazy mushroom trip where he saw all of his skin melting and he saw himself as an all-black figure. That was the moment when he realized that race was not a thing. Race is fake. Darky would resign his Brahman character from green to all black, and that's the mascot of Lil Darky that you see everywhere now. But Darky wouldn't start blowing up until 2020 during the COVID era. Darky would form Spider Gang, started making controversial hits, and having his songs dominate TikTok. People try to cancel Darky for his use of the N-word, where he explains it better than I could.
So then I say nigga and shit with my friends, cause like, just be niggas. But then like people like hit me up and they're like, why are you saying nigga? You're not black. And it's like, yeah, like be mad then, because like I'm not gonna change who I am for you, you know, because it's like that's who I am.
Darky still pushes out music and still going on tour. Spider Gang isn't really a thing anymore, and all of the artists are doing their own thing, which we'll get to soon. And it looks like Lil Darky is just gonna go up from here. Moving on to our next entry, Suicide Boys. Suicide Boys is a rap duo that was formed in Louisiana by both rappers Scrim and Ruby the Cherry. Before they made music together, Ruby would be in various punk bands, and Scrim would be on his own way of making his own beats. The both would come together one day and realize that they need to make music together. Eventually eventually forming the duo that we know now as Suicide Boys. They would release their first project, Kill Yourself Part 1, but they started getting more attraction when they made their mixtape with Puya, Southside Suicide. The duo would continue pushing music throughout the SoundCloud era, collaborating with more artists in the scene, artists like Jay Green, Night Lovell, and Black Smurf, and would soon form the label G59. Suicide Boys are more popular now than they ever were. Now they have their songs blowing up on TikTok, but the boys would often express how grateful they were for that. But other than the TikTok fame, they are very well respected in the underground. Their music always consists of drug abuse, mental issues, and all that good stuff, and their music would touch a lot of people's souls. It's pretty weird to see where they are now considering the way they were back then. I remember in high school everybody thought I was weird because Suicide Boys would be in my playlist. Shit, now you got everybody listening to Suicide Boys, but you know what? They made it. Moving on to the next entry. Lil Peep. Lil Peep was a rapper that was born in Long Island, New York. Lil Peep would grow up listening to artists like Gucci Mane, Chief Keef, Blink-182, and Green Day, which would all contribute to his sound. When Lil Peep started rapping, he started going by Trap Goose, later dropping that name and using the name Lil Peep because his mom always called him a Peep. Lil Peep would soon join the group Schema Posse with Jay Green and Ghostman. We'll get into Schema Posse when we cover Jay Green. Peep started making songs and mixtapes with the trap sound and emo sound, and his voice drew a lot of people in. Every rapper was calling themselves a rock star at this time, but Peep was probably the closest to it. Lil Peep would start becoming more and more popular. Peep was getting recognized by the mainstream, but unfortunately before Peep could make it any bigger, Peep's life was tragically cut short due to an overdose. He died on his tour bus on November 15, 2017. He was only 21 years old. After Lil Peep died, his mother would actively fight in court by suing Lil Peep's managers because they supplied him drugs on tour, and she also wanted all the rights to his music. His mother would win these cases, and now she owns Peep's music, putting out a posthumous song every here or there. I wanted to put him on this Iceberg because his music was pretty dark, you can't lie. It was pretty different for the time, and it's a shame that we'll never see what could have came out of it. Rest in peace, Lil Peep. Speaking of tragic downfalls, next up we have Citymorgg. Citymorgg was a trap metal duo with two artists, Zillakami and Soul Smoola. Before they became Citymorgg, they used to be in Scum Gang with Tekashi 6ix9ine. Citymorgg would start blowing up in 2017. They would make albums and go on tour and building a whole big fan base for themselves. Citymorgg would announce in 2022 that they would soon be dismantling. However, they would still keep dropping music and going on tour up to 2023. But unfortunately for the duo, all good things must come to an end, but sometimes it's a bad ending. In 2024, Zillakami will get hit with some serious allegations of him abusing his ex-girlfriend and talking to a minor. But more on that later. But for the status of Citymorgg today, it's remained unknown. But I think it's safe to say that Citymorgg is not going to come back. I think they have ran their course musically, especially since their music was starting to sound stale to me. Soul Smoola has been doing his own solo career, and Zillakami has been nowhere to be seen. However, Citymorgg would influence the underground where a lot of people just really try to sound like them now, I'm not gonna lie. And that's Citymorgg. Ghostman. Ghostman is a rapper that was very popular in the SoundCloud era. His music would be heavily influenced by punk rock, metal, and rap music, especially Eminem, since that was the only rapper his father would play growing up. His father wouldn't be very supportive of his music. However, his father would give young Ghostman a guitar for his 14th birthday. Ghostman would practice every day and eventually found friends and formed his first band, Nemesis. The band didn't last though. However, when Ghostman turned 17, his father would pass away. Ghostman felt upset about it, but he felt a relief that he can do anything he wants now without his father's control. It kind of went downhill from there. His mother would move back to New York, and Ghostman was left to be on his own. He even tried to get himself into the military. Ghostman would release mixtapes on Dat Piff until his girlfriend showed him SoundCloud, and that's when things started to switch up for him. He would meet Jay Green on Facebook and join his group Schema Posse with other people like Lil Peep. Ghostman would move into LA where he would live at the Schema house. It was a very bad environment, but he adjusted to it. He would make music with Jay Green and Lil Peep, but eventually he would leave Schema Posse to focus on his own work. Not too long after, Ghostman would be an opener to a Suicide Boys show where he would meet Puya. Him and Puya would become best friends and work together. Ghostman's career would just go up from there. It's also important to note that Ghostman worked with a Russian artist named Pharaoh, which would boost his popularity in Europe and Russia. Ghostman is still making music today and going on tour. However, Ghostman would be hit with a lot of accusations of him being abusive to his ex-girlfriends, in which you can watch a whole video about it right here. But other than that, that, we're moving on. Scarlord. Scarlord is one of the pioneers of the trap metal genre. But before he started making trap metal music, he was a YouTuber called Mazzy Maz. He would later form the group Myth City, but Scarlord would find most success in trap metal. Scarlord would drop a song in 2017 called Heart Attack, and it took the internet by storm. This was when X was alive, so the music was very relevant. Scarlord would get his influences from anime, which is why he has the whole look he has now, and Scarlord is still pushing out music and tours today. He recently just dropped a new album that has been receiving mixed opinions from fans, but I recommend you checking it out. Xavier Wolf. Xavier Wolf was born in Memphis, Tennessee. Xavier would grow up having an interest in cars and drifting. He wasn't very interested in music, but he soon started making beats under the name DJ Quicksand, and he would soon join the group Raider Clan, where he would meet people like Space Ghost Perp and Chris Travis. He would go by the name Ethel Wolf, but he would soon change that name when he left Raider Clan in 2013. He changed his name to Xavier Wolf. He felt like he needed to stem apart from his group and create his own identity. Xavier would stop rapping about your typical rap stuff like guns, violence, and money, but instead he went towards a personal approach. He would get his inspirations from anime and his personal struggles that he was going through. Xavier would make numbers on SoundCloud and eventually would join the group Sesh Hollow Water Boys, where it had artists like Chris Travis, Bones, and Eddie Baker. The group would eventually stop making music together because of personal issues with each artist. When Sesh Hollow Water Boys ended, Xavier would continue to push out music. Xavier was such a big figure in the rap scene. He was getting really big to the point where he was booked to be the supporting act for a Limp Bizkit tour in 2024, but however he was dropped from that tour. In early 2024, Xavier Wolf was hit with allegations where he was being mentally and physically abusive towards his ex, forcing her to take drugs and sexually assaulting her. He also was abusing her dog. Xavier Wolf would go on Instagram and post an apology on his story, basically admitting to everything that he did. This is what he said on his story. 5 years ago, I would have to say was the darkest time of my life. I hurt people I loved, I hurt my friends, and I hurt my family. What I did back then, there's no excuse for it. I was ashamed then and still ashamed now, since I've been doing things I think are necessary to better myself, with therapy, anger management, and rehab. I hate when motherfuckers come to the internet to apologize, because that doesn't solve anything. What really solves the problem is doing something about it, which is what I've spent time trying to do since that time, and I will continue. To the people that support me, I love you to death. It kills me to have to let you down like this. From Xavier's own words, it sounds like Xavier is self-aware about his actions and took time to post online to not only apologize, but to admit his wrongs. However, fans are still mixy about supporting him, but his music is very popular in the car meet scenes. It also looks like Xavier is taking time for his personal life, even having a kid on the way. Even though Xavier's reputation is tarnished, you can't deny the influence. And that's Xavier Soul Base. Moving on, Ski Mask The Slump God. Ski Mask The Slump God is a rapper who was born in Florida. Ski Mask would often get in trouble where he would serve time in juvie, but while he was spending his time in juvie, he discovered a passion for rap music, especially since his father used to rap under the name Sin City. Ski Mask would later meet X in juvie, where they both would become best friends and make music after they were released. Ski Mask and X would make the group very rare until they formed it into something bigger called Members Only. X and Ski Mask would make themselves known in the South Florida underground scene, where they would do concerts with other underground rappers at the time, such as Lil Pump, Smoke Perp, and more, even getting a close connection with Denzel Curry. XXX would later go to jail, but once he came out, the fame would increase Ski Mask's attention, where he would be famous alongside X. People liked his music because of his energy. His music was very inspired by Cartoon Network shows, and he'll also have a video placement on Lyrical Lemonade. X and Ski were both doing good for themselves, but unfortunately when XXX died, Ski Mask felt lost inside. Ski Mask stayed dropping music and continuing X's legacy, eventually working with artists like Juice WRLD, where he would go on tour with him. I actually went to see them in 2019, but that would also come to an end when Juice WRLD died later that year. Having two people who died in Ski Mask's personal life took a big mental toll on him. Ski Mask would take multiple hiatuses throughout the years, ultimately making people kind of forget about him, because after 2019 there were so many artists blowing up in the COVID time era. Literally half of the people on this Iceberg started making music in the COVID era, but he was still remembered in the trap metal community and the rap world altogether. But if you want to know what Ski Mask is doing now, Ski Mask dropped an album last year in 2024 called 11th Dimension. He also recently had a daughter, and he recently just dropped his own clothing brand, Castle. I also want to say, I can't find the screenshot anymore, but he did post on his story that he wants X type of beats to be sent to his email. So any producers watching this video, please send him beats. But other than that, Ski Mask is a true respected underground pioneer. But we're gonna move on. Now it's time for the king of New York, the best rapper alive, Tekashi 6. Nah, I'm just playing with you. That was the first layer of the iceberg. Now we're moving on to layer 2. We're gonna be going over this one a little bit quicker. Space Ghost Perp. I gotta give Space Ghost Perp the credit he deserves. If it wasn't for him, half of these motherfuckers wouldn't even be here. But let me give you a rundown. Space Ghost Perp is another rapper who was born in Florida. He would start making music at 13, being inspired by artists like 3 6 Mafia and the whole Memphis scene. Space Ghost Perp is the reason why the Memphis Revival started. In 2008, Space Ghost Perp decides to form the group Raider Clan. Raider Clan had artists such as Xavier Wolf, Denzel Curry, Eddie Baker, Young Simi, Chris Travis, and they would often be associated with Bones and ASAP Rocky. Perp and Rocky would become friends for a little while. They would work together, but Perp started to realize that ASAP Rocky and ASAP Mob were stealing his style. It was very clear that ASAP Mob was copying Raider Clan. However, this beef would really mess up Space Ghost Perp's career. Everybody was taking the side of ASAP Mob, and SGP started feeling like every artist was against him. He would start ruining more and more connections around him, and even went on Twitter to say a lot of negative things that ultimately impacted his career in a negative way. Space Ghost Perp would be forgotten in the internet, but as of recently, he's been producing a little bit more. He recently just produced a mixtape for Acid Soldier. Other than that, Space Ghost Perp is still a legend in the underground, but he doesn't have the same demand that he once had. But you can hear his influence throughout the whole underground. Up next, we have Bones. Bones was born in California. His family would have a very rocky relationship where he had to go house from house. Bones would soon develop a passion for music and start making music at the age of 9. At first, he was going by Elmo the Kid. Elmo is his first name, but once he joined YouTube, he went by The Kid and would soon change his name to Bones because of his fragile figure, and he felt like The Kid was too childish since he felt like he was growing older. Bones would soon meet 2 friends on the internet that liked his music and formed the group Sesh Boys. Soon he'll meet Xavier Wolf, Eddie Baker, and Chris Travis, and they'll form the group Sesh Hollow Water Boys. Bones would push out mixtapes and start gaining attention in the underground, even gaining a spot on the Jimmy Kimmel Show with ASAP Rocky. Record labels would reach out to Bones, but Bones would refuse every single one. He is also considered the blueprint of the emo rap genre. Bones is still dropping songs and recently just had a kid. And there's so much more about Bones that I haven't gone over, but there's so many videos about him that you can watch. And we're moving on. Jay Green and Schema Posse. Jay Green is a rapper that was very inspired by Memphis rap music. He would get a personal connection with Juicy J, where he would guide Jay Green musically and making him a better artist. He would soon form the group Schema Posse on the internet, where he would meet artists like Lil Peep and Ghostmane. Jay Green was allegedly too problematic in the group. Peep and Ghostmane would eventually leave Schema Posse, and Jay Green didn't really do anything much after, and his career would slowly die down. He is still respected in the underground though, and Schema Posse is no longer as big as it was, but the Instagram account is still running and posting other underground artists. Up next, Ramirez, Nylovell, and G59 Records. Suicide Boys, Nylovell, Ramirez, Germ, Shakewell, and Cheddar are all rappers that are signed to the G59 record label that is owned by Suicide Boys. They all would go on tour with each other every year for grade A. I do not know why, but they decided to choose Joey for this year's lineup, which is very I don't know, I guess it's better than Cemetery. I just hope those shows aren't under 17 because those shows are the worst. You can find multiple videos on YouTube about the artists in the G59 label. Lil Ugly Mane. Lil Ugly Mane is criminally underrated. Lil Ugly Mane grew up in Richmond, Virginia. He had a passion for graphic design growing up. This would inspire his career later on in life. Lil Ugly Mane was making beats in the 2000s, but he didn't start blowing up until the early 2010s when he started making cover art and production for artists like Denzel Curry and Raider Clan. Lil Ugly Mane would soon drop his classic album Mr. Thug Isolation in 2012. I actually have this album on cassette. It seems like lately Lil Ugly Mane has been focusing on his personal life.
Yeah, for the past couple months, I've just been buying old, out-of-date systems and attempting to get them
You can watch more
online.
about it in this podcast right here. Next, Doom Shop. Doom Shop is a record label that was founded in 2014 that has multiple artists that contribute to the Memphis Revival scene, such as Freddie Dredd, Lil Kane, Baker, and more. Their music would become really popular on Roblox. TikTok kids started to hear about them too. Their music would go on and inspire the funk sound that you would hear today, and you can watch a whole video about their come up right here. The Memphis Rap Revival. If it wasn't for Lord Infamous, Tommy Wright III, Gangsta Pat, or Graveyard Productions, then I wouldn't even be talking about really anybody on this iceberg. Memphis rap horrorcore was a subgenre of rap that originated in the late 80s to the 1990s. At the time, it was very hard for rappers to get their music heard, and they would have very limited production resources. These rappers would rap on horror movie sampled beats and rap about topics of devil worshipping, drug dealing, and abusing, and speaking about what was going on in their area at the time. Obviously very different from what other mainstream 90s rappers were talking about at the time. Yeah, they talked about drug dealing, but abusing the drugs? drugs, that was a whole different level. Memphis rap production is consistent of hi-hats, booming bass, and raw production. On the internet, you can find a mix of good quality Memphis tape rips to bad quality rips. I actually got a few 3 6 Mafia tapes. The Memphis sound didn't start hitting the mainstream until the early 2000s, but it was automatically changed to party music called crunk, and 3 6 Mafia left the horrorcore style behind. Years and years later, Space Ghost Perp comes around, Raider Clan comes around, Suicide Boys, literally everybody I mentioned would contribute to the Memphis rap horrorcore sound. But their influence didn't just hit the underground, it hit the mainstream. The beats that you hear rappers rapping on now, from the flows to style, Memphis rap had a clear influence in rap music altogether. These are a few classics that I recommend. Let's go on to the next one. Odd Future Wolfgang. Odd Future is a rap collective that was created in 2007 in California. If you like Spider Gang, but you don't know who these guys are, I don't know what to tell you. Odd Future's members were Tyler the Creator, Earl Sweatshirt, Domo Genesis, Frank Ocean, and much more. They would begin to gain fans because of their I don't give a fuck attitude that they would push out throughout their music and the media. They even got their own show on Adult Swim called Loiter Squad. The group was doing pretty well. However, like most collectives and bands, Tyler the Creator would announce that Odd Future is no longer a thing. In 2015 to be exact. It looked like the group has ran its course, and each member wanted to focus on their own personal career. Especially Tyler the Creator, since he literally hit mainstream status. OF to me will always stand for Odd Future, and their influence will live on in the rap world. But let's talk about another group that did not end with a happy ending. Members Only. Like how I mentioned earlier, Members Only was a group that was founded by XXXTentacion and Mask The Slump God. The group would gain over 30 members, but on the screen, here's a list of a few ones that are worth mentioning. They would make music together and do concerts, especially when X came out of jail, where the group would gain a lot of attention because of X. Things seemed like they were going good for a little while until X died in 2018. X was basically the leader of the whole group, and without him, the group would suffer. Members would start having beef with each other. Key members of the group like X and Craig Zan would leave, and they would drop their last album, Members Only Volume 4, on X's birthday. I have more information on Members Only that I want to talk about, but that's going to be for part 2. But for the rest of the members, they're not very focused on music anymore, and it seems like drug abuse and mental issues have taken over their lives, or their music just isn't hitting the same anymore. I hope maybe one day a few of them can squash the beef and make music again, but let's move on to our last entry. Cemetery and the Haunted Cemetery grew up in Northern California. Growing up, he was a loner and had no friends, but one thing that he had was a passion for music. Growing up, Cemetery would listen to artists like Chief Keef, Young Lean, Black Cray, and more SoundCloud artists. Eventually learning about death metal in high school. He felt like he can make music himself, so he decided to do it. Cemetery would start off making beats until he realized that he wanted to be in the spotlight because he felt like producers don't get enough recognition. In high school, he would meet longtime friend and collaborator Ghost Mountain, where they both began making music together, both being inspired by the same music. The both of them would continue making tracks until they realized, hey, we should make a group. Cemetery would later go on to recruit artists that had the exact same style that he had, ultimately forming Haunted Mound. The group's popularity started going up, the same with Cemetery's ego. It's been proven in videos and even Cemetery's close friends that Cemetery isn't really the greatest guy. There was also a situation where Ghost Mountain temporarily left Haunted Mound, but now he is back. It's also worth mentioning that Haunted Mound did have a stalker that would affect the group negatively. Here's a whole video on that right here. Haunted Mound altogether is a very controversial group, but I want to say, I think Cemetery's genre is trap metal. Go listen to Cemetery's music and come back to this video and let me know if you think his shit is trap metal. Because I don't know what else I would call it, to be honest. A lot of scream rap artists don't like calling themselves trap metal because they don't use any metal elements in their music besides the scream, but this guy does. Anyway, Cemetery and Haunted Mound are still pretty popular and they still make music. Yo, you guys think I should get this shirt? Yo, this shit looks fire.
That's the end of part 1. Thank you to everybody who stuck through the end. In part 2, we'll be going into more depth into the underground side. But overall, this was really fun to make. If I got anything wrong, please comment. My next video should be out in a few weeks. Other than that, follow my Instagram. My name is Kill Crucifix from Rotten's Web, and we out here.